Back in October 2022, Henry Cavill made his return to the DCU as Superman in the form of a cameo in the end credit scene of Black Adam. Not very long after that, however, James Gunn and Peter Safran were hired to run DC Studios, and then everything changed, especially for Superman. Henry Cavill was let go as Superman, as James Gunn has confirmed the beginning of a new universe with a younger Superman, and a solo Superman movie seems to be the biggest priority for James Gunn and this new universe. Or at the very least, it's the movie that's been talked about the most by fans, news outlets, and James Gunn himself. I won't mention Peter Safran very much, since it's James Gunn who's the creative head of DC Studios, while Peter Safran is more the business side of things. Plus, James Gunn is very active on social media. Now, James will be writing the movie, but confirmed that he will not be directing. The movie will not be an origin story, but will focus on a Superman earlier on into his career. And other than that, we don't really know anything concrete about the movie. But like I said, James Gunn is very active on social media and loves dropping hints for the new universe, or replying to tweets or liking tweets about the DC universe. One of these hints may already confirm what the Superman movie will look like, or at the very least, the main comic inspiration for the movie. James Gunn posted an image to his Instagram story about a Superman story called Superman Up in the Sky. And this comes like a day after the story's writer Tom King mentioned that he took a long break for Hollywood stuff and now he's back to writing comics, and it's clearly or almost certainly connected, which all suggests that the Superman movie will be based off of Superman Up in the Sky. It doesn't need to be a direct adaptation, it just may be inspired by it or just take story beats, but James Gunn loves hinting at things, and I do think that this is a hint. Superman Up in the Sky is a 6-issue miniseries released between 2019 and 2020, written by Tom King, about a little girl being kidnapped by an alien and Superman deciding to go track her down in space, while also dealing with the weight of the responsibility of leaving Earth behind without its main protector, and the dilemma of whether or not it's worth it to go after that girl. The DC Universe and the Justice League are all established, but Superman's importance to Earth is made very clear throughout the story, in spite of a world full of heroes. Along the way, he goes through a series of mostly standalone stories with little to no explanation of how he got into the situations of those stories. Situations like a boxing match with no explanation about how he got into the boxing match, what it's for, how it gets him to the next goal, but it's just a story about Superman persevering and never giving up. There's one story where he gets split into two entities, the cold Kryptonian Superman and the warm human Clark Kent, who argue about whether or not searching for the girl is worth the people he isn't saving back on Earth, and even one story where he just casually gets sent to the past and teams up with Sergeant Rock. It's a great story, if a bit difficult to read, with a lot of emotional weight, and has a great grasp on the character of Superman. However, it is not a good story to directly adapt to a movie, at least not a big budget movie that's meant to be easily digestible for everyone. It's not what I would call an easy read, especially if you aren't aware of the episodic nature of the story, which I did not know about before reading the story, but also just the nature of the looser story, or even lack thereof. A direct adaptation would not work. However, I think a reworking of the story to make it a more conventional story with the same story beats might work, and honestly, it might be the perfect story to tell for this new Superman movie. Now, Superman is basically the only character in the story with a significant amount of screen time, or what would be screen time in a movie, which is very different from basically any other movie DC has ever released, which always has some supporting characters and some emphasis on those supporting characters. But this may very well be exactly what James Gunn is going for, and it may very well be exactly what this universe and Superman as a character needs. It's quite possible that the main goal of the first Superman movie is to re-establish Superman's place in pop culture. Not that Superman is irrelevant, but some people think he's boring, maybe because of Superman Returns. Other people only like him when he's dark and edgy, possibly because of Man of Steel. And then there are people who think that Superman needs to be evil to be interesting, possibly because of Injustice or even The Boys. I'm not saying I dislike all those movies and shows. I love Injustice and I love The Boys and I like Man of Steel, but there's no denying that the general public's reception of Superman is askew, and it's possibly because of all the movies and TV shows. that either aren't able to make a regular Superman interesting or are forced to make him dark, edgy, or straight up evil to make him interesting, when you don't need to do any of those things to do that. Just look at Superman and Lois or the DCAU or the DCAMU in the movie The Death of Superman. These are wholesome and heroic and human Supermen who at sometimes could get a bit dark and a bit angry, but that's not their main personality or their go-to. They are good adaptations of Superman, and I do think that there hasn't been a universally loved Superman movie in like 40 years, and Superman's image has suffered from it greatly. There needs to be a universally beloved, wholesome Superman movie, and this story might be the perfect story to use for that purpose. So what if James Gunn's plan here is to make a movie inspired by Superman Up in the Sky, which uses the same story beats of a girl being kidnapped by an alien, and Superman grappling with the issue of putting this one girl ahead of the entire world. So many people all the time say that Superman is boring, he's too powerful, you can't really do anything with the character, but this story is perfect for Superman. It's kind of unique to him because he has the whole world on his shoulders, the weight of the responsibility of protecting the entire world, but then he can't be in two places at once. He can't do that job but also go save the girl. It's a story that's unique to Superman, and it's interesting, and it combats the idea that Superman is too powerful, you can't really do anything interesting with the character, and at the same time, not only would it be changing the general audience's perception of Superman, but also the audience would get invested in the character of Superman because this is an emotional story, and you definitely learn to love Superman throughout the story, even if you didn't before. Now, this story where Superman's supporting cast barely appears and Superman is really the only character with any significant amount of screen time doesn't really sound like a good story to develop Superman's supporting cast and surrounding world, but I don't think that should be the main mission for this first movie. It sounds like a great story to reinvigorate Superman's real-life public image, while, like I said, getting people invested in the character, and then maybe a sequel or a spin-off TV show or whatever this universe will look like can give characters like Lois and Jimmy and Perry and Lex, etc. enough time to develop alongside Superman, because even if you love the DCU and you love Man of Steel and you love Henry Cavill as Superman, you can't deny that it was divisive. It wasn't a universally beloved version of Superman, so I do think that they need to do that. That should be the most important goal of the next movie, to make a universally beloved version of Superman. You don't have to develop the other characters at all, focus entirely on Superman. But also, this story doesn't just introduce Superman. He's the only character that gets any screen time and development, but it kind of establishes the rest of the DC universe at the same time as well. The story doesn't actually start with Superman. It starts with Gotham City as the girl is kidnapped from Gotham, which obviously involves Batman from the beginning. Then Hal Jordan gets the Green Lantern Corps to search for the girl, which adds to the argument that Superman should remain on Earth. Superman talks about this dilemma with Wonder Woman, and later on there's a whole story which is a flashback to the race between Superman and the Flash, narrated by the girl who was kidnapped while telling a new perspective on their race. My point here is that while reading this story for the first time, which I only did because James Gunn posted about it and then I saw comments praising it, so I thought I'd check it out, I realized how well and effortlessly it lays the foundation for a larger universe, which, if we do get a very similar story, would take the same approach. In one movie, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, as well as their relationships with Superman would all be established in a universe that I think should start out after the founding of the Justice League. All of this would be in just one or two scenes each for these characters, who would all basically just appear in cameos, but at the same time, if they do the same thing that they did in the story in the comics, they would all have a substantial-ish role in the story, or at least have a role in the dilemma that the story represents. And then obviously you would develop these characters in their own movies or TV shows, but basically what I'm saying here is that James Gunn and Peter Safran, using this story, or a more streamlined and conventionally told version of this story, can very well change the perception of Superman while also getting the general audience emotionally invested in Superman, while also acting as a sort of guide for the new DC universe that's about to unfold, introducing the universe's 5 main heroes, those being Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Green Lantern, as well as the latter four's relationship to the universe's main hero, Superman, all while telling an emotionally engaging and, considering it takes place mostly in space, visually spectacular story. all of this kind of sounds a bit familiar. James Gunn has kind of already done the exact same thing, albeit on a smaller scale with lesser known characters without any audience bias towards them, with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I don't know about you, but I did get emotionally invested in that space-based story, which introduced that part of the world's 5 main heroes, and obviously the relationships to its main hero. So I have faith in James Gunn's Superman, even if he isn't directing it, but he is writing it. If he ends up directing it as well, then it's sure to be a slam dunk. On top of all that, in a very similar but separate story, James Gunn also reposted an image of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow on his Instagram story from the comic writer's Instagram, which is also Tom King. This story is slightly newer even, coming out between 2021 and 2022, and tells a story about Supergirl alongside Krypto going to a medieval planet with a red sun on her 21st birthday in order to get drunk, and then having her paths cross with a young girl seeking revenge on the man who murdered her father. That man then steals Supergirl's spaceship, and then both Supergirl and that girl go on a space adventure to find him. This story is structured similarly to Up in the Sky, with a looser feel to it and a more episodic nature. I don't like the actual story nearly as much as Up in the Sky, but I did really like the characterization of Supergirl, and the art is a million times better, not only because the art in Up in the Sky isn't actually very good, but also the art in Woman of Tomorrow is absolutely fantastic. This comic is visually incredible, and if anything else, they should take visual inspiration from this comic, definitely not from Up in the Sky, for a Superman movie, or maybe even a Supergirl movie or TV show. Gunn posting this may very well be a hint either at a Supergirl TV show or Supergirl movie, or a Supergirl TV show or movie based off of this story specifically, which I wouldn't mind at all. It's a great story, and especially if they take inspiration from the visuals, they could get something really cool out of it that puts the old Supergirl TV show to shame. And I think the best thing they could do is maybe a miniseries or potentially a TV show, with this being its first season, but the second season having to be completely different. Because Supergirl is a very interesting character who's different enough from Superman in the fact that she witnessed Krypton exploding, or she was old enough to experience it. It's unique from Superman, but I think for now it's not really all that important for the DC universe. I think eventually Supergirl will appear, and maybe even very early on, but the reason I talked about Superman a lot more in this video, and I think the reason that we're focusing on Superman a lot more, is that he's so much more important to the DC universe that they really need to get that right. Like, whatever they do with Supergirl is interesting, but it's not nearly as important, because if they screw up the Superman movie, there might not be a universe at all. The only other bit of news that happened with James Gunn is that he posted about the Batman Grant Morrison comics because it appeared in a picture he posted. I didn't actually notice that hint, and then James Gunn mentioned that it isn't a hint, it's just he read those comics, which obviously it didn't bum me out or anything because I didn't even notice the hint before that. However, the fact that he replied to this saying that this isn't a hint indicates that basically everything else is, so I think that's actually pretty cool. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you think that this comic is what they should go with for the inspiration for the Superman movie. If you have read it, that is. If you haven't, you should probably go check it out. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and some scribbly dibbly, and goodbye.